Welcome to Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray, founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors. Zach and the team help families here in Illinois plan successfully for retirement. They strive to understand all of your financial needs to help guide you on the path to your ideal retirement. This is Rooted in Retirement.
Welcome to Rooted in Retirement. I'm Amy Sharp. Joining me, Zach Gray, founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors. Retiring early may sound like a dream you wish would come true, but when an early retirement is forced upon you, it can be less than ideal. Today, Zach tells you what to do if that happens to you. Plus, in this week's retirement game plan, how much risk can you really afford to take as you get closer to retirement? Zach shows you a smart financial tool that may help you find out. And Zach, it's great to be back with you.
Good to be here with you, Amy.
So we are talking today about the subject of being forced into retirement, and we've seen that a lot. People have had to do that over the last several months and the year that we've been in, and it's just not a fun subject to think about. You want this to be on your terms. When we think about retirement, we have all these grand plans and we think about what it would look like. But if you're forced into it, that shifts your thinking. Tell us what that conversation is like when you sit down with a client who is having to retire early.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion with that. And sometimes it's a mix of emotions. There's excitement and, the idea of, well, can I retire? I mean, there's even a bit of anxiety with that question. I mean, am I going to be okay? Will I have enough? And sometimes there's sadness because, like you say, it's not planned. And we want to do this on our own terms. I think you phrased that very well, right? So we want to be in control of that decision, make sure that it's right for us. And sometimes life throws us curveballs. And some of those could be related to other ideas or issues. But yeah, being forced to retire is it's a big pill to swallow, and then making sure that we can kind of go through that process and see if retirement's even an option at that point.
What are some of the reasons that we may be forced to retire early?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of shakeup with many different companies in many different sectors because of, a pandemic and really just economic concerns. That's a good one though. Economic downturn comes right to the top of mind. Or, what about a health diagnosis? I mean, that would be something to be thought of. If it's unexpected, we don't see it coming, and then all of a sudden we have to deal with that in one way, shape, or form, or even that of a family member, right? I mean, whether that's helping care for them, if maybe that's something that would be a concern that, if they have an unexpected injury or health diagnosis themselves. So what do we have to do to change things up? And that obviously can force us into a different spot financially and potentially in early retirement.
I think about if I were to get that call or that notice that, my job had been eliminated or I'm forced into retirement for whatever reason it may be, thoughts of what do I do next? I'm paralyzed probably at this point. What is the first step?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, take a breath for a moment is all I would say. For many folks, we step them through our Rooted Retirement process and we say, you know what, you're in good shape. You can retire. And, instead of working an extra couple of years, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. That is a conversation that we have from time to time. I would just say, let's analyze the situation. Let's take a look at it from a very conservative viewpoint, which once again, that Rooted Retirement process really ropes that in and looks at it under that microscope of, what happens if things are okay, but just okay? Like it's not grandiose in terms of returns, etc. Am I still in a good spot moving forward? The big thing though, take a breath, let's analyze the situation and sit down with someone that you trust that can step you through that process of saying, okay, how does it look? Can I retire? We can start to answer those questions.
Yeah, you really just want to get your confidence back. That's the key. I want you to take us just a little deeper into that Rooted Retirement process that you do and just what that looks like to the client.
Yeah, so we start to look at a couple key components. Income, number one. Do I have enough money to retire? That's the question that most people have. Am I in a good spot moving forward? Secondarily, we have to start to think about investments. Chances are we're getting some of that income from our investments. And then even on past that point, what type of investments do we have? Is it something that we're going to get taxed on when we pull that money back out. And we have to even start to think about things in terms of what we call legacy. And that's not just leaving money behind to someone, though that is a part of that. I would say that we have to look at this in terms of what about healthcare planning? And what about maybe helping a child or a grandchild that might need help years after we're gone? Let's start to take a look at this plan of making sure that we live life on our terms, that we do life the way that we want to see it played out. But at the end of the day, that legacy idea is something that really kind of captures many components and brings it back together.
This is such an emotional topic too, and I know that's something that you're not necessarily there to be the counselor, but it is partly your role.
Yeah, it is, because you start to look at this from, especially if we're talking to a married couple, it's now a mix of different ideas on what does retirement look like. I just sat down with a prospective client. They actually just came on board here the other day, and it was so fun because she says, well, his idea of retirement is a cabin in the woods. My idea of retirement is a beach and it's hot. He says, I'll never exist in that warm weather, And it was interesting to just kind of have this conversation playing out in our conference room and starting to uncover really what their thoughts of retirement really are, and let alone if it would be something that's more of a forced retirement, which is what we've been talking about in this segment. It becomes this, can I retire? I want to support a spouse, or if someone's single, it's just, hey, all this pressure's on me and me alone, so can this be done? And that's what that rooted retirement process does so well. It starts to answer those questions about, is it possible, and what is the best way to retire?
All right, thanks so much, Zach. Great advice. We've got more coming up. Love your job so much that you think you'll never retire? Up next, Zach explains why that plan could backfire. And later, in Retirement Game Plan, market volatility is here to stay. How can you survive it? Zach shares a smart financial tool that may help. But first, here's how you can contact Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors. Stay tuned.
Hi, it's Zach Gray from Rooted Wealth Advisors. If you're like many people, you might be wondering if you're ready for retirement. Have you saved enough? How much income will you need? When can you retire? Planning for retirement can feel overwhelming. That's why we created our Retirement Roadmap Toolkit. It's designed to give you the resources to gain confidence as you start your journey to and through retirement. Visit the link today to get your free toolkit. At Rooted Wealth Advisors, we believe you deserve to have a great retirement. Visit the link to receive your free kit today.
Welcome back to Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray of Rooted Wealth Advisors.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Back with Zach and talking about, earlier we were talking about people who are forced out to go into retirement. And now we're going to switch gears just a little bit and look at those people that, they don't look at work as work. They want to work for many years and maybe not retire. What is it, the saying, do what you want to do and you'll never work a day in your life, something like that?
Yeah.
What do you say to those people?
Well, that's an awesome outlook, right? And that's a fortunate place to be. And I really feel that way about what I do. It's extreme pleasure for myself and really anyone on the team to help folks into their retirement years and see them be happy and thrive in retirement. But things can happen, right? There's unexpected changes that happen in our lifetimes that we can't account for. So as much as I think, I'll be happy doing this for a very, very long time, well, life could, throw us a curveball. And if it does, we have to be prepared for what that could look like. And as we start to think about it with retirement, very important to be looking at it under that microscope. What about the unexpected?
And what are some of those unexpecteds that are lurking out there?
Yeah, just so much comes to mind. Obviously, health is a huge one, right? As you start to think about the fact that as we age, there's no doubt that, things can happen and we will likely slow down and potentially, come to our last day here on earth. And that goes without saying. And we just had a client and he comes to mind, great guy. He's a doctor, really into making sure that he was fit and healthy. And he passed away tragically. It was a very sudden passing, and that wasn't in the plan. And he did not want to retire at all. That was not the plan at all for him to slow down, let alone retire. And now all of a sudden we're in a position where we're very thankful that we planned and saying, Doc, what happens if you are forced to retire? that if your body just doesn't want to go anymore, I mean, that you have a stroke, he had those running in his family bloodline. What happens if that happens to you, Doc? Let's make sure that we're planned, that we're ready. Hopefully that never happens. It'll just make the numbers look better and things will be, even brighter from that point on. And sadly, something tragic did happen there. The good news is that we were planning for it in the case that what happens if he changes his mind and makes a change, or that maybe health is something that just throws him a curveball. So health is the big one that comes to mind, but maybe it is change of management. Maybe we can't be in alignment with those that we are working with now and colleagues and so on and so forth. Maybe we're forced to take a kind of a sharp turn, and you know what, if that's not something we want to have throw us off track, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, as I listened to you talking about, as we switch back to being forced into retirement, the emergency fund comes to mind. We hear that term a lot when it comes to retirement planning, making sure, and that's really something that you always want to have as you're going through your working years too, but when it relates to a health crisis, it's so critical to have that backup emergency fund in place.
Yeah, as I think back to, COVID, which is not too far in the rear view, we have to be thinking about, obviously that big shakeup there. And then many folks were positioning themselves to emergency fund dollars. And it doesn't matter if we were visiting with someone that was 60 or 20, those conversations were a lot the same. Hopefully we had 3 to 6 months worth of savings put away in a safe account where we can utilize those dollars as need be. And so that emergency fund is very critical to that. And yes, making sure that we've built a portfolio plan that can absorb some of those bad times, whether that's not so great times for the market, but maybe just not so great times where we need that money somewhat unexpectedly.
Does that dollar amount change in my emergency fund at any point? Should I increase it throughout retirement? Is there a key to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of a flat out emergency fund, probably not so much. Some dollars in the savings account, it's always very smart to have. As we think about retirement though, once again, our plan starts to shift to distribution, not accumulation. So what is the plan? Where is that paycheck going to come from? And once again, we want to have that built for good times and not so great good times as well. So that is something we need to be thinking about.
At Rooted Wealth Advisors, just take us briefly through what that looks like as they come in to visit with you, what that conversation is going to be like, whether it's I'm being forced into retirement or I'm ready, I'm going to do this on my own.
Yeah, it can be very daunting, and I think that there's just kind of an overwhelm that sets onto that conversation. We like to make it very simple, very straightforward and easy to understand. So when someone comes on in, typically we're stepping through, okay, what do we have for accounts and what do we think retirement looks like? We want to talk about the fun things, right? We want to make sure those golden years are truly that they're golden, right? That we can do all the things that we've been wanting to do. We start to look at all the pieces of your retirement puzzle, whether that's taking a look at Social Security, maybe you have a pension, maybe there's other cash flows, how do the investments look? And we can boil that down to something that's really easy to understand. And that's what I'm probably most proud of, is that we can take a lot of complex data, answer a lot of questions that are looming for folks that might even be out there watching us today, and then secondarily, put it into something that's easy for them to understand and get some confidence and clarity from.
Yeah, a lot of times we're just looking for a second opinion too. You can help them out with that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Zach. Next, just how susceptible is your portfolio to market volatility? Up next, Zach shows you a powerful financial tool that could give you more clarity. First, here's how you can contact Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors. Stay with us.
There are some things you can't avoid, but you can avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. You may think your taxes will go down in retirement, but that's not always true. In fact, sometimes your tax liability could go up. We're offering a free guide to show how you may be able to pay fewer taxes in retirement. Learn how different retirement accounts are taxed and options to help make your retirement income more tax efficient, all in easy to understand terms. Download this free tax guide now to help keep what's yours and avoid overpaying taxes in retirement.
You're watching Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray of Rooted Wealth Advisors.
I'm back with Zach Gray, and I want to talk about market volatility right now and what it means as you near retirement, because a lot of different opinions on this in terms of risk, and I imagine it's not necessarily a time to throw caution to the wind and just be willy-nilly about it. We want to make sure we have a plan in place and know what type of risk we want to take. How do you help with that?
Yeah, definitely as you're getting close to retirement, right? So those few years outside of retirement, maybe those first few years of retirement, we really just don't want to make a big mistake in terms of risk in that little window of time. And you know, as I think back into when I got started in this business, it was the tech burst of the early 2000s. The market was going down big. Many people remember 2008.
Yes.
They just don't remember maybe a few years before that. And it was so impactful to me because my grandparents had just retired, the market's moving downwards, there were some other things that were going on in their life, but market risk is a huge part of that conversation. And so as folks come on into the office, we like to say, okay, what type of risk are you taking? And most of the time, if I said, Amy, what type of risk are you taking in your portfolio? What do you think they might say?
I probably wouldn't have a perfect answer for you on that one, just because I guess I'm not a big risk taker, so I'd say very minimum.
There you go. And so I think that there's a lot of interpretation to that though, right? If you say, oh, I'm a conservative gal, I don't want to take a lot of risk. Well, let's try to quantify that and let's try to make sure to make the most of your portfolio, the decisions that you make, because I think that if I say I'm a middle of the road guy or I'm a low risk gal, it's hard to kind of pinpoint what that looks like. So we actually use something called Riskalyze in our office, and I like it because it takes a lot of really sophisticated data and it boils it down to something easy to understand.
Now we're talking.
There we go. And I like it just because, yeah, I mean, as we start to talk about standard deviation and bell curve data and beta, and there you go, right?
Mind
just
blown.
people just kind of they
Yeah.
just kind of gloss over.
And you just have to shake your head and smile.
Exactly. So if you don't mind, let's just go through a real brief simulation today of how this works. So, you know, it's going to ask a lot of questions, some of which are, what are your financial goals? So if I were to say, what are some of the goals that you have, what would you say?
Okay, I'm going to choose, retirement, wealth accumulation, and college savings.
Very good. So these types of questions are imperative to understand, okay, what should we do with our money? So the next question is how much money do we have? And congratulations, you have a $380,000 portfolio for our simulation today.
It's impressive, just like that, you did that.
Wave of a magic wand, there it goes. So as we think about the next question, here's a great question. Define a devastating loss to you, and let's do it in terms of a percentile.
Okay, well, I'm not a big gambler or risk taker like we discussed, and this is probably more than I should, but 40%?
40%, yeah, that surprises me coming from a conservative gal like yourself. So 40% of that number would be about $152,000. So I think this is kind of step one here in terms of quantifying that loss. When I say, hey, Amy, what type of risk do you take? The first answer is typically general. Secondarily, what is that number? And whether it's 10, 20, 40%, now it starts to say, okay, well, that slips right off the tongue. That might be okay.
I'm questioning my decision now.
Now that you see it's 152 grand, that's a big, big number. The other thing that Riskalyze does very well is it starts to uncover what your risk score should be. So we think of this in terms of kind of a 1 to 100 scale, 1 being very, very low risk, 100 being very aggressive. And so it starts to ask you questions such as, would you prefer certainty to have a gain of 10%? So now you're going to be north of 400,000 with your total portfolio. Or would you trade it away for a 50-50 coin flip of heads you lose 40% or tails you could gain 150%?
I think if I were on a game show, I would go with a 50-50, but this is real life, we're talking somewhat. Right. So I'm going to go with the 10% uncertainty.
Okay, I was surprised there when you answered this question because you just said you could maybe lose 40%, but I think that number scared you back a little bit. That's the second one though that I would ask is so now that we think about a secondary question, would you prefer the certainty of now a loss, certainty that you would lose 15%, or trade it away and you could be in a heads you lose 40%, and now you're back to maybe a 2.25 number, or tails, you gain 150. Now you're getting to a point where you're getting close to $1 million threshold, but that's a big coin flip. What do you answer on this one?
And that again sounds really good, but I'm going to be conservative.
Very good. Well, if we answer it those ways, your risk number would fall to 33. So on that 1 to 100 scale, you're a third of the way through it. And it starts to talk a little bit about 6-month standard deviation, or we call it comfort zone here. And that means that, if things are really good, well, maybe you could get a 8, 9, 10% number in that little wheelhouse. And if things are really rough, you could lose maybe 5%. Now, when we scored that $380,000 portfolio, you'll find that you're taking more than double the risk. So for a conservative gal like you that says, you know what, I think I'm good at like a 3, 3.5 on a 10 scale, or this 33 number, now all of a sudden we say, did you know that you're taking some risk that's not that far from the market, right? And now you score a 67, where if things are good, that's wonderful, you could do much better, but if things are rough, now all of a sudden you're starting to lose a lot. And Amy, one really neat feature about this that I enjoy is this portfolio stress test. I like it because it really simulates, okay, in good times or bad times, well, what does that 67 even mean for Amy? So if we look at 2013, bull market, things are great. You know what, your 67, it would do really well. You'd gain 105,000. Now the market would do a little bit better, but keep in mind you're not taking quite the risk of the market. Now in bad times though, we talked about 2008, so we bring back that bear market. Now all of a sudden you're going to lose 180 plus thousand. It's almost half of the dollars that you have saved. The market, it would do about 200,000 in a loss. Keep in mind, a little bit riskier portfolio, but that's the eye opener to say, in good times, how well do I do? But sometimes as we think about retirement, especially for a conservative gal, if we're going to answer those questions that way, do we really want to take that much risk at that point? So comparing that 33 to, once again, double the risk of that portfolio at a 67, sometimes that's an eye-opener for a lot of folks. And I like to share many times if we just get decent returns. So if we're hitting singles or doubles, things can be very good, right? We can hit those retirement goals. But if we're up there swinging for the fences and we strike out, now it's one thing if the market does well, but if we strike out and we lose a big chunk of that portfolio, in your case that 67 is almost half of it gone for that particular time window, that could be a really crushing blow. And that is really why I enjoy this Riskalyze piece. It really breaks down risk for those that might be interested to know, where do I fall in terms of that risk?
Thanks so much, Zach. It really clears it up. Riskalyze, that's a powerful tool. Very good. All right, thanks so much. And still to come, we'll hear directly from you in our Q&A section. But first, here's a special offer from Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors. Stay with us.
You know you want to retire. You might even know when you want to retire. What you don't know is what the world will look like. A short market drop, a crash, a recession. What if I told you these words don't have to change your retirement dreams? World events can impact your retirement, but thankfully, they don't have to. Can your retirement survive the unexpected? Visit the link to find your risk score to help you prepare for retirement when you're ready. It's time for you, not outside forces, to be in control of your retirement. Find your risk score so you can be ready no matter what comes next.
Welcome back to Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray of Rooted Wealth Advisors.
Now it's time to get to some of the questions you have for Zach today. Are you ready for this?
Always anxious to see what has been written in.
I was going to say, this is my favorite segment. I don't know about you because you're kind of on the hot seat, but here we go. Here's one from Jeff in Normal. I'm thankful I still have a job, but my employer just sent out a letter saying they're no longer matching our 401k contributions. Should I stop contributing and put the money elsewhere, or leave it as is? And I think a lot of people came up against this topic just in the last year as well, with companies kind of deciding we're not doing those matches.
Yeah, and I would always say get the match and then let's pump the brakes for a minute and then at least take a look at the landscape. And so as I tell folks, here's a good example. As we look at say a Roth 401k versus a Roth IRA. If we're getting no match, well, chances are, either account would do the same thing, depending on how much money we were saving. And with a Roth IRA, if we needed that money back right away, right? If we needed some of that principal back that we wanted to go use for an emergency, we could go get it. Now, we can't likely take all the cream off the top, any of the growth, but we could go get back that money. With a Roth 401k, a lot more hoops to jump through there. We have to look at how old is someone, plan details, are they still working or have they been let go? Maybe that could change things a bit. My point is, there'd be a lot more flexibility, chances are, with just that Roth IRA in that example. So I would just tell folks that are listening out there, get the match, then let's pump the brakes for a minute, take a look at the landscape. Now, where do we plot our extra savings? If there's no match, maybe we need to kind of back that bus up to that point and then take a look to say, now where do we place the savings at this time?
Okay, thank you so much. Here's another question for you, and this one is from Barb in Champaign. I'm 54 and was hoping to retire in 10 years or less. But after reassessing my IRA account and seeing where I could be paying up to 40% of my savings to various taxes, I realize I either need to work longer or get a better tax plan in place. All right, I'm at a loss as where to start. Can you help?
You know, for many people, they don't realize that the biggest partner they're going to have in retirement might not be a spouse or their kids. It's going to be Uncle Sam. And starting to understand that, you know what, some of this money that I've saved, it's going to go to the IRS in the form of taxes. At least this gal has made that, you know, kind of uncovering of that concern. And so, yes, a tax plan, very, very important. How much you actually get to keep in your own pocketbook, that's what we're after. It's not how big the account is, it's how much do we actually get to keep and use. And I think that's extremely important as you start to look at, yeah, it could be as high as upper 30s brackets at the Fed level. You have state tax on top of that. What about capital gains tax? There's been a lot of proposal for change there. And, you know, as we start to add those things up, you know, yeah, you can easily get to a third of that money or greater gone to the IRS and tax. And that's extremely, extremely important. And that's why tax has really just kind of become this real serious talk that we have to have with our clients or prospective clients that maybe call into the show, because once again, it's all about how much you actually get to keep.
Yeah, it's not the most fun topic, so maybe you should provide snacks next time you talk
There you
that
go.
subject. I feel like that would help out a little bit. All right, we've got another one for you. Dwayne in Bloomington says, is there a good rule of thumb for how much of my IRA should be invested in less risky investments at age 60, or is it just a matter of personal preference?
You know, that's a tough question without knowing a little more backstory to that, because once again, income is a little bit the outcome that we're after in retirement. So if we have enough income coming from sources like a pension, or maybe that's rental properties, or maybe that's Social Security, then, well, maybe we can take more risk. For most people that are watching us, though, it really does become this, you know what, we need to kind of pull the reins back a little bit on risk, much of which is because we're going to use that money in retirement. So is there a rule of thumb? I don't think so. But is it really important that we look at diversification, not only in the types of investments that we have, but also in terms of risk? Most definitely. Understand that risk can be a real big factor as we start to think about sequence of return risk. How do we utilize this money going forward? Making sure that we don't run out of money. It all circles right back to that risk conversation. So safer investments, yes, something that we need to be looking at or thinking of, but I just would also be saying is let's take a look at the entire picture as we put that plan together.
Thanks so much, Zach. We appreciate your insight as always. And if you have a question, reach out. We just might use one of your questions on a future show. And don't hesitate to act on the information you've heard today. It never hurts to call, even if it's for a second opinion. Don't wait. Call now. For Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors, I'm Amy Sharp. Have a great day and an even better retirement.